Hello everyone, warm welcome to my panelists here today and welcome back everyone at home for a session entitled An Industry on the Road to Net Zero, the Road of Renewables and Hydrogen. My name is Thekla von Bülow. I'm a project leader at Aurora's consulting business and I lead our activities on decarbonisation and PPAs. First of all, let me thank all my panelists for being here in person today and having made the effort of coming to Berlin. Despite Corona and the lockdown, it is so great to be sitting here with you on a panel, and it is not something that we are taking for granted. I am really excited to build up on the discussion I just had with my colleague Cora on corporate decarbonisation, and we will discuss your views and practical experience on how the road to net zero happens in practice. We will discuss strategies and hurdles for industrial players in Germany to achieve net zero in light of the EEG 2021, the proposed EU climate law, and the proposed hydrogen strategy. The session will be around 1 hour long. As always, at home, if you have any questions, feel free to ask and post these in the chat, and we will make sure we answer them after the session. So let me introduce you to my great panel today. First of all, on my left here, we have Dr. Roland Merger. He's Vice President Renewable Energies at BASF. Roland, you are a chemist by training.
Yes.
You studied at the universities of Bristol and Heidelberg, where you also did a PhD on organic chemistry. You have been at BASF for a quarter of a century.
Yeah, a little bit more.
A little bit more even. And you have seen various parts within the company. You've worked in R&D, in purchasing, but also marketing and corporate technology. So in your current role, you are responsible for the green energy transition at BASF. So maybe just for our virtual audience, maybe you could give a brief introduction of what it means for BASF to become carbon neutral and what that means for the energy needs of BASF.
Yeah, thank you, Thekla. Maybe I start in the past. As a company, we have come a long way when it comes to CO2 avoidance. So if we compare our CO2 emissions, say starting 1990 and today, we have halved our emissions, and at the same time we have doubled the volumes which we produce, which means that specifically we have even reduced emissions by 75% per ton of produced products. So you might think this is good news. It's good news, but it's also a little bit worrying news, because we have already seen a few years ago that we are now reaching a saturation with the given technologies. With the today existing technologies which we use, it is extremely hard to avoid even more CO2. You can squeeze out a little bit more efficiency here and there, but we will need completely new technologies if we want to take the next major step in carbon avoidance. And we have already started a few years ago to develop these technologies. We have quite a few of them already ready in the lab and are now upscaling them in the first pilot plant trials. But it might take up to 10 years to be ready for implementation on a really large technical scale. So what we have promised as a target in the meantime is that while we are developing these technologies and scaling them up, what can be done, it's a stretch, but because we want to grow even further, using the given technologies, that we grow carbon neutrally, which means that until 2030 we have promised to our investors to grow our business, but to society not to emit more CO2 than we have emitted in the last years. We keep the emissions constant.
Basically, sustainable and carbon neutral growth.
Carbon neutral growth, we call it. Yeah.
Right. And I think what's quite interesting for BASF also is that you have nearly 75% of own energy production.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say as next. So this will only be possible if we switch from fossil energy supply gradually and as far as we can to renewable energy supply. In the past, we have been producing most of our power, about 70 to 80% ourselves, in highly efficient combined cycle power plants using natural gas as a power source with a 90% energy efficiency. But this is not enough because still these plants will emit CO2. So we will replace our energy supply by and large with renewable power. And so our target is that in the future we will also have a mix of procurement of renewable power, and we are also looking into backward integration into renewable power as well.
Right. Yeah. And we'll look into that in more details now. Welcome, Roland, and thank you for being there. My next guest to the left of you is Christine Lauber. She's a Director, Sales and Origination Germany at Vattenfall Energy Trading. Welcome, Christine. You are an industrial engineer by training. And interestingly, you started off your career at BP, working in different engineering roles. You joined Vattenfall in 2010, which is obviously one of the largest European utilities, very vocal on the green transition. And in your current role as Director, Sales and Origination, you are working together with the largest corporates and offer a wide range of renewable and commodity products, services and products. So, welcome, Christina. Could I ask you to give our virtual audience a brief overview of Vattenfall's transition to fully committing to renewables, and how does that kind of tie in with your own transition to renewables, if I may say that?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think if you ask me this, then I think of probably two words, and the one is, I guess, be ambitious, but I also think of passionate. And I think if I think back in Vattenfall, early 2018, when we really decided it's time to change. And it's not just time to change, but it's really time to be ambitious and push for change. And we really decided to be at the forefront of designing also this change. And I think it's, of course, currently, I guess everyone is busy with COVID-19 and taking care of our health, but it's really probably letting forget us that the big crisis is really still there and we haven't solved it. And if I think back in the beginning when I started my profession, it was really a small topic. And I guess if you listen now to the famous climate experts, you hear that we have probably around 10 years to really make a change and stop the climate change. And especially if we think in Germany, it's one new government being elected this year who can make this change happen. And so for us, it's really an important topic. And that's why we decided in 2018 also that we want to enable and help all our customers, partners, but also societies to be able to have a fossil-free living within one generation. And we feel this is already ambitious, but we keep pushing. So in every business area we run, every product we produce, I guess every manager in Vattenfall has it in the performance agreements. It's constantly followed up, and we are trying to push it even more. And we feel that this is very important, but we also cannot do it on our own. So we look a lot for partners at the moment also. We want to do it together. I think it's not a one will fix it all thing. We think really let's do it together. And so a joint CO2 reduction, I guess, is for us the most ambition. And we feel also that there is still a lot to do. I guess we have many new laws in place where we probably hear a lot. It's ambitious. We think there is more possible. And of course, if you especially look at us being also a large power producer with a strict focus on renewables now, we really would like to do more offshore business. We feel also that the big corporates are also at a stage where we need to think about funding schemes so that really this decarbonisation can also happen in Germany. And the last is probably that we are also excited about to make this change, because we think within one generation there is a lot to do, and we really love that.
Yeah, and it's great. I really liked your point that you said it really has to be lived by everyone in the company. And oftentimes compare it to if you really want to improve health and safety, for instance, this is really something that has to be lived from the top to the bottom. And it's the same for becoming carbon neutral. You have to encourage your employees to come by bike and live the transition. So really love that point. Great to have you here, and we'll touch upon some of the points that you mentioned in more details in a bit. Last but not at all least, Moritz Wickert, who is head of energy systems at STEAG Solar Energy Solutions, or SENS. You studied business administration and with a very early specialization in energy and recycling. You co-founded a company which I found really interesting, which was a kind of an investment platform for green renewable projects before you joined Decarbonize Energy Solutions, which was then acquired by none other than STEAG, who and is now called STEAG Solar Energy Solutions. So Moritz, as perhaps not everyone in the audience will know SENS, maybe you can give a quick introduction of what SENS does and how does SENS fit into the world of STEAG, which still originally called as Steinkohle Elektrizitäts AG. So maybe you could tell us a bit about the cultural change there.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, STEAG is in the middle of what we call Energiewende in Germany. So we have a big challenge of turning around that business that has been fossil-driven, coal-driven over the last decades. And STEAG now has to become a leading company, or wants to become a leading company in the new designed energy market. And their SENS obviously fits very good in, because we are very active since more than 15 years now in the PV industry. So the big challenge for STEAG is to turn the business model away from coal, and on the other hand use the know-how, the knowledge, the experience we gained over the last years with complex technical energy systems to enable our customers to decarbonize as well. So we want to use that know-how to enable the customers. We did many different things apart from coal over the last few years as well. Perhaps many people don't know that, but we did. We started already in 2015, or STEAG started in 2015 with a large-scale battery system of 90 megawatt. We did a lot of projects in wind energy. We were starting with CHP plants, doing heating grids and district heating, enabling our customers with electric vehicle charging infrastructure, optimizing grids, so many things already, using that experience and bringing together a new package of solutions for the customers. So there have been many ideas which ended up the last big action acquiring SENS, STEAG Solar Energy Solutions. And as I said, we are busy in the energy market, in the PV market since more than 15 years now. We do EPC for large-scale ground-mounted projects all over the world. It's an international business for mainly investors, but also we have the energy systems part where we offer rooftop solutions for industrial and commercial clients, mainly in Central Europe, very focused, of course, on the German market, but also abroad, looking to Vietnam, to Botswana, so many countries. And here we do rooftop development, rooftop EPC, and we add electric vehicle charging, we add storage where it's needed, and find complete solutions for the customers. Also, we have a sister company in Stuttgart doing energy efficiency monitoring software to find the big consumers and develop strategies to reduce. And not to forget that, as we are talking about hydrogen as well today, STEAG started with the Hydro Hub in Fenne with a 17.5 megawatt electrolyzer, and we just recently announced the new project in Walsum, with a big echo in the market, with a new hydrogen project together with Thyssen. So many things to help that turnaround happen.
Yeah, and very interesting to hear the different activities of STEAG, which I think can also help to make people more aware of all the activities. I don't think everyone knows that. For me, very interesting. Indeed, hydrogen would be interesting to hear a bit more about the hydrogen projects and the role you see for hydrogen in a minute. I would like to open the panel discussion now, and starting off to talk about the roadmap to 2050. So, as you know, in the EEG 2021, Germany has now really sealed the targets for net zero by 2050, which in the end leaves us 30 years to get there. It seems to be a long road, but in reality, we really have to start now and have high levels of ambitions, as you already said, right now. So, Christina, since you're supporting kind of large clients in the transition from grey to green power, how do you see the roadmap planning out until 2050? Especially from a renewable supplier perspective, should the whole industry start decarbonizing now, or do you see kind of a step-by-step approach and an order of prioritization?
Yeah, I think important, I think you mentioned it already, it's still 30 years to go. That's a bit also, I think, the feeling. On the one hand, you think, 2050 is quite close, but then it's still 30 years to go. And I think we in Vattenfall are concerned that, of course, we keep discussing a lot how now best to start this process, or when is the best moment to start. And we really think that we should do this today. And if we talk about our customers and how we can really enable them to get to a fossil-free setup, it's a bit difficult, and I guess you're pointing a bit on this question, is it really the big ones you're starting now with? Because of course it's naturally, if you look at the CO2 emissions, these are the ones really emitting, so our large chemical and metal companies in Germany, or are we also looking at smaller ones? And I think I feel I have a lot of ideas how to help, and what we also actively do in projects. I think we have also quite some lighthouse projects and cooperations. I said it in the beginning, for us it's really a joint thing. It's not that we want to help on single things. We really feel if everyone brings the competences in, that you can really do this together. And I think there's a variety of topics, but I think it's difficult to say just what I've mentioned on the smaller ones, because I think if you really feel that Germany as a technology company, technology country should also have a leading role in the future, you of course need to not forget them, because they are developing the technology also to reduce the CO2 emissions or to decarbonize. But to my daily business and how we discuss also with customers, of course we have a focus on the really large ones as well, because I think there is a need for really urgent actions. I think they also strive for partnerships, and where everyone can also bring its best competences. And I believe there is a good way to get started now, and then really look at joint decarbonization ideas, but probably also just to really force the renewables build out in Germany, which I guess we're also coming a bit on.
Right, yes, we'll talk more about that, and it's interesting. So basically you're saying everyone should start, but let's really focus on the big levers, the large corporates that are very energy intense. So luckily we have one of those sitting here. Roland, you already said that you aim for a carbon neutral growth, really try to ensure that BASF remains competitive, but you said you have a huge task ahead of you to adjust these processes and to electrify. How does that work in practice, and is that something that all the R&D that you do, is that something you do in-house, or as you were saying, do you work with other industry leaders, and is that a joint effort?
Yeah, as a chemical industry, we are an energy-intensive industry. So and to answer your first question, of course, we should start now with what can be done now. The first step that can be done is to to switch as much as you can from fossil energy supply to renewable energy supply. That is the first thing. The next thing is that you need to develop those technologies, and this is a huge task, which even we cannot do alone, but we are doing this in partnerships and also supported by public funding. Let me give you an example. At the beginning of our value chain, we have big machines which are called steam crackers. These steam crackers, they take naphtha, which is nothing else but a kind of gasoline from the refinery, similar to the gasoline you use for your car, which is heated together with steam to very high temperatures, between 800 and 900 degrees centigrade. And the high temperature and the steam make the molecules in this gasoline, in this naphtha, break apart into small molecules, which are at the start of our value chains. Traditionally, we reach these high temperatures, or we still do, by burning natural gas, which of course causes quite some carbon dioxide emissions. And we are now just scaling up into the pilot plant scale, a so-called e-cracker, which will be electrically heated. But this is a huge challenge because you don't only need the chemical know-how, you need also a lot of engineering know-how in electricity, which we don't have. So we have partnered up with academic institutes, but also with other industries, and do this as a joint effort, because actually it doesn't help if only we as BASF do this. This must be a broad industry approach to change the chemical industry to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. And in this case, if this technology will work, it will reduce our carbon dioxide emissions from these plants, from these steam crackers, by 90%, which is quite a step. Yeah.
And just a follow-up question out of interest. When you're rethinking these processes, is there a potential also for carbon capture within the processes?
We have looked at carbon capture, and yes, that can be used, but the problem is that carbon dioxide for a chemist is more or less a dead molecule. You need a lot of energy to do something useful with carbon dioxide. So the best you can do with carbon dioxide is to avoid its formation in the first place.
Right.
And that's where our priority is. But we have realized that we will also in 10 or 15 years not be able, or 20 years, to avoid all the carbon dioxide. So there will be some leftover carbon dioxide which can be converted into useful molecules using electricity or using hydrogen, and then we can produce other starting materials for chemical production from carbon dioxide, which is called carbon capture and utilization. Yes.
Interesting. Great. In terms of, in terms of electrification, you say that probably your requirement for green power will increase substantially.
Yeah.
So that will require massive renewable build out in Germany. And so let's talk a bit about the potential for that, and maybe let's start to look at solar first. And Moritz, what potential does the solar power have in Germany to decarbonize the industry? And would you agree with Christina that it's the large corporates first?
I think it's, as always, it's a mix. I mean, we have investors looking for huge PV plants. We still have those PV plants in Germany. We have the possibility to still erect quite big solar farms for institutional international investors. They are mostly looking on investment in green assets. And we have the industry, commercial industry, factories willing to decarbonize. And I think that the potential is quite big in the bigger companies, but on the other hand, the structures are much more complex, as we actually learned. So I think in the medium and mid-sized enterprises, there still is a big potential also to reduce emissions. We have the possibility to set up PV plants. We still have a lot of roofs where there's no PV on it. We have the electric vehicle discussion, especially for the short-range distribution of goods and people. We have also still the possibility to reduce actually consumption in the companies. So the potential to find energy waste and to just switch it off is still huge. And there's quite a big potential in those smaller companies, there's huge potential in retail and warehouses, of course, and obviously a big potential in the bigger industries. But as I said, the complexity is different. A smaller company will look for a full service provider because they don't have actually the capacity to do things on their own. Bigger companies have staff doing that on their own. So it will be a mix, and when it comes to international companies, also we will have to look whether it makes sense to start in one country and then do a rollout to other countries. So in general, I wouldn't totally agree that it's the big companies, but obviously the portion of the big companies is the biggest, but I think the most complex also to gain. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean it's probably also very technology dependent, right? Solar has the potential to offer more kind of decentral and smaller solutions. So Christine, I will let you respond to that. And what role do you see for solar, and probably what is your focus on the other technologies like onshore wind and especially offshore wind, of course?
Yeah, I think quickly maybe reacting to solar, I think we also have a huge interest and belief also that solar is important. I think, of course, if you have big corporates who want to decarbonize, it will be always an element to also look at solar. I think especially during the peak times, during the day, it nicely often fits to the production and energy demands also of these companies. But I think it's, of course, an element always to think, do you put it there where it's already pretty crowded? We also believe that utilities or large-scale solar farms is potentially an option. We think we could have even more areas available also in Germany, because as closer as you come to villages or cities, it's getting more difficult. I think we see this as a general hurdle still to overcome and to find maybe also incentive schemes for smaller cities, just to let it come a bit closer. So I think it's an important element, but of course if you're coming from a large-scale power offer also for your company and you want to structure the future, and I guess you quickly touched also on topics like hydrogen, not to deepen it now, but I guess we have a massive electrification and then energy demand in Germany coming up, and also running quite successfully offshore assets in Germany already. We really would like to see this growing and to have also a big build out in this technology and also belief. So if you can compare also how the first installations run and how things are today, it has improved significantly. I think the coast areas in Germany have really transformed to a supporting scheme to make it happen in Germany. And I think we had now quite of a dip in the offshore, so we are happy to see that auctions are starting to come up again, but we believe that this could be quicker. As said, there's a huge energy demand. It's interesting as you also can do things together, and we also as Vattenfall believe that it's time to start, because you have quite some time until they will be at the grid. Especially if you look at the space offshore, I think there is a lot of discussions also which needs to be taken on co-use, multi-use, because we need space, but a lot of the space is already planned. And so really at the forefront also saying that would be a good step for Germany as an industry location to also get huge volumes of green energy in the country. But of course not forgetting also on onshore. I think there, especially also now given the COVID times, I think we have seen a real big dip. So I guess we need them all. But I think some passion you can probably hear out of my wordings.
That's why we have a panel with different perspectives, which is great. Staying on the topic of renewables, I would like to talk a little bit about power purchase agreements, which is something that, especially from corporates, we hear more and more interest and demand. And talk a little bit about what the role of power purchase agreements will play on the road to decarbonisation. What is the case for BASF? Are PPAs something that you see as one pillar for your decarbonisation, and does that fit your criterion for carbon neutrality?
Yeah, definitely yes. As I said, we are aiming for a mix of different sources of renewable energy, and power purchase agreements are an important part of it. They are quite a new instrument, still under development. They are not yet standardized, and it must be made sure that they reflect, say, a fair distribution of risks and chances between the seller and the buyer. And looking at these contracts, they tend to be very long-term contracts, 10, 15, 20 years. Now, if we look 10, 15, 20 years back and look at today, who would have predicted many of the developments we have? So we must make sure that these contracts give us the flexibility also in the future to react on, say, unforeseen circumstances in markets or in regulation. If we commit for such a long term for fixed prices or price collars, we must make sure that the risks and chances are distributed evenly between sellers and buyers.
Absolutely, and this is what I spend most time on, is kind of to see what are the expectations on both sides. And Christine, so you have different expectations. Obviously, you're on the other side of the PPA and Moritz as well. How important will PPAs be from your perspective, and comparing with actual merchant build out? How much will you rely on PPAs to achieve the build out that you're seeking?
Yeah, I guess if we look in Germany, and you can probably call them PPA light, but at least with the first EEG and then the Direktvermarktung subsidy scheme, I guess we would have not seen such a massive build out. On the one hand, of course, without the subsidies being placed on the assets, but also on the other hand, on the security the asset owner gains through a PPA contract. And I guess that also still lasts with reduced subsidies now. If you look at a PPA or maybe also at a full merchant PPA, it's an important element for a specific industry, especially also if you look at investors or banks. I think it gives the security they also need to invest. But I think there we also need to make really a mind change. I think you just touched also a bit on a balance of risk taking, because of course the tenors are intended to get longer. Sometimes we also see shorter tenors coming up where this takes a bit of a new thinking. I think bank and investors also will need to change that it's not 100% safe investment anymore. Because the build out needs to come from something, and not someone can carry the whole risks. I think we will have key competences, what a PPA also brings. I think it's a nice example already how you bring different interests but also competences together, so someone can better operate the asset. Someone like us, for example, can also provide very good trading services and optimization schemes, which is quite an important factor for running renewables. So I believe it will be an important factor, and of course then also to have a possibility to serve others with green energy again. So I think it's a good structure to come across, but I think I said it also in the beginning, it's not just PPAs, you can also share in equity, for example, and upfront already share the risk and then consume the energy directly within your companies. I think I see really new ideas coming up, but I think I also keep challenging a bit some, I would say now also a few years established patterns, that this also needs to change a bit, because especially with the longer tenors, I think it needs to be for both parties a good setup, and I think that's also important that this will be the same in the future.
No, absolutely, and we also hear that large utilities are getting approached by corporates to discuss in how far they can get involved early on, take some development risk, and then also share kind of the offtake and ensure the access to green power. More on the solar side, then what do you see, or how do you see the potential for PPAs in Germany? So for solar, as a reminder, it's mostly for either the extension of lifetime, so plants that get out of the EG after 20 years, or for merchant build out, so mostly the power plants that cannot go into the auction, so over 20 megawatts. So is there a strong growth potential for PPAs on the solar side?
For sure, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's not only the solar side. We have the colleagues, from what I hear from the colleagues in STEAG trading, and they get more and more inquiries for green PPAs, so deliver green electricity. And we see it in the ground-mounted business. We see that PPAs become more and more important for actually off-taking the energy from the bigger parks. And with the new EEG, not even looking at older plants, so the PV plants being out of the feed-in tariff after 20 years, I guess there will be a market as well, but many of them will switch to self-consumption. But with the new EEG from beginning of this year, I think PPAs will even become more important also for rooftops to sell the electricity, the excess production of the plants, which cannot be actually consumed on site, because the off-taking mechanism in the feed-in tariff actually changed a little bit, or not a little bit, but quite a lot. So we will see many more on-site and off-site PPAs, as well as kind of a mixture of on-site and off-site and delivery of the remaining electricity. What we have seen in the last years, 2-3 years, that other markets are much more advanced in that. So in the UK, PPAs are much more common, obviously, than in Germany so far, but we also see PPAs rising in Spain. The colleagues in Spain have more and more inquiries for PPAs, so I think PPA will be quite a big thing for the next years.
No, absolutely. I mean, the German market is fairly new compared to the UK. Also, what happens in Spain and the Nordics also. That is a market in its infancy. And how do you see this whole topic about standardization evolve? Do you expect more standardization on PPAs in Germany? Is that something that you would welcome?
I think so, because it will be, actually it's a handling issue. From my perspective, if you just look at a rooftop PV system, you only can realize such a project if you get more and more things standardized, because otherwise you will get lost in contract negotiations and things like that. So I think also the acceptance of PPAs will rise with more and more standards. Yeah, for sure.
Interesting. Okay. Good. Let's switch topics a little bit, or we're staying on the same topic, but I would like to elaborate a little bit on hydrogen, which is something, as you know, is a really, really hot topic for the moment, and something that the industry is looking into. Roland, just to start off, what's your take on hydrogen? Is it a hype? Is it something that BASF is looking into?
There's certainly a lot of talk about hydrogen at the moment, and I think hydrogen will play an important role in the future. There's no doubt about it. If we look, for example, at the chemical industry, but I guess the same holds true for other industries as well, our plants are very expensive, very high investments. They need to run flat out. They need to be utilized to the fullest extent for us and others to remain competitive. Now, if we look at the supply of renewable energy, is usually volatile. It depends on the availability of wind and sun. So the first role, and the most important role I see for hydrogen, is as a storage for energy, to make a flat and reliable supply of renewable electricity possible. That will be a very important role for hydrogen. Another role is, in our industry and also others, is the conversion of conventional hydrogen, where there is a lot of carbon dioxide emissions. You have about 9 tons of carbon dioxide produced per ton of hydrogen if you produce hydrogen in a conventional way. This should be step by step converted into hydrogen from renewable energy. Unfortunately, this production via electrolysis requires a lot of power. And as we all know, renewable power at the moment is still scarce. So I agree with Moritz that we need every green electron we can get hold of, be it onshore wind, offshore wind, or solar, because renewable energy is still scarce. And so we should not waste it. And this is one of the reasons why, and yet you asked me what we are doing, why we look at also alternative ways of making hydrogen without carbon dioxide emission. Not only via electrolysis, we look at a process which is called methane pyrolysis, which still uses natural gas as the raw material, but it produces hydrogen and requires only 1/5 of the electricity which you need with electrolysis. But it's a new process which we are just scaling up, and it will take another, say, 5 to 10 years to make sure that it can really be scaled up to the industrial and technical scale. Just to show that we are very active in hydrogen and looking at also at alternative ways of making it. Okay.
Yeah, and it's always good to put a time stamp on the development of these technologies. It will take time, and in actual fact, we really have to start now in order to get there in time. So you're saying blue hydrogen, not so much of an option. We're really trying to get into.
I'm not saying I've not commented on blue hydrogen. The hydrogen I've been talking about is turquoise hydrogen. We call it turquoise because it's still fossil based, but you have no carbon dioxide to take care of. Blue hydrogen would be hydrogen from conventional production using CCS or carbon capture and storage to take care of the CO2, which is also an option that cannot be discarded. There might be locations where this could be, at least for a transition time, the preferred option. For example, if you have a carbon dioxide emission source rather close to an opportunity where you could store the carbon dioxide, then this could be, at least for a transition period, a good solution to take care of the carbon dioxide.
Interesting. Yeah, let's hear a bit more about the projects, Moritz, that you mentioned on hydrogen at the sites of Fenne and Walsum. What color does that hydrogen have? And maybe you can give us a bit more insight of what these projects are about.
I mean, Walsum is pretty new, so we just announced it and start with exploration. We got quite a big echo of potential partners. In the end, it is in the long term anyway, hydrogen should be green. I mean, there are many different colors, but if we go the road for hydrogen, should be green. And then the question will be, actually, where does it come from? So will it be from? Can it be generated only in Germany? Is it a more international thing? But we're looking to make it green. So for the Fenne, I think it's the first big experience with the electrolyzer of STEAG. And now we are looking to make the second step in Walsum.
Interesting. What's Vattenfall's take on hydrogen? Are you already getting involved? Are you jumping on the train?
Yeah, I guess we definitely want to jump on the train, but I guess especially if we look at the German market, I believe it will be still a few years down the road until we really see this as a commodity coming up, but also really as the topic to discuss, like we do about PPAs or renewable build out. I think we definitely believe that it should be green. Of course, we know there is a transition, but if we really want to enable fossil-free living within one generation, it must be green, also from an efficiency perspective. And I guess, it's not in Germany. We have our only pilot project at the moment, which I think is a great one, is in Sweden for fossil-free steel, which will be a pilot plant ready in 2025, which we are very proud on also to get proof points that this can be also in an efficient and especially commercial efficient way possible. So it's definitely something we are setting on. I think it fits quite well also, especially of course with offshore as a storage technology. I think that's a bit the second pillar, so fully agreeing to what you said. It will be interesting how batteries and hydrogen now will also have this battle, who's the better storage component. But I think it's nice because it can be transport. We have a quite remarkable gas grid in Germany. I guess there are quite some potentials, and you can produce it everywhere. You can produce it offshore, near shore. So I think there is a lot of possibilities. Of course, grid connection, I guess, is a topic. But I think it's good to have open eyes for that and really keep looking at that. But I still feel it's a few years to go until this is really the next topic also. I think technology-wise there, I think it's good that we now have some pilot plants also evolving and testing that.
Right, yeah, so I think we all agree it will take some time until it will play a role in one form or another. Maybe there's some colours that we don't see yet that might emerge, and that might become interesting in a few years' time. I guess when it comes to hydrogen, but also in general in energy markets, one major aspect in achieving decarbonisation is the policy side. So I would like to talk a little bit about that and maybe find out if you could wish for something, what would that be? So Germany is very keen to achieve carbon neutrality, but in a competitive way. Especially the current German government is looking to maintain Germany as a place of innovation, of industry leadership. So the question to you first again is when we talk about growing a BASF in a carbon neutral way, is that in line with what the German government and policymakers are planning? Is it wishful thinking from the German government to be able to maintain the competitiveness while at the same time achieving net zero? And what would you wish for from policymakers on that side?
Well, I think almost naturally, if you ask me whether the development is fast enough in politics, if you ask somebody from the industry, it's never fast enough. Yeah. So we need, I think we need an adaptation of the regulatory system, which has been invented 10, 15 years ago, or the EEG, which was probably a good instrument to get an industry started. But now, this EEG levy, for example, might not be the best instrument anymore, because what it effectively does now, because it's quite high, is that it selectively penalizes the use of electricity versus the use of other energy sources. And that might not be the best way of doing it if we want to incentivize the use of green electricity. So we need to rethink how we can make it possible and more attractive to use electricity as the main energy source, and there we should take away, say, penalties on the use of electricity. How this is be done, I don't know, but this is certainly something we need to rethink. And other things are, if my wish list is very long, but I think the first priorities would be we need more areas. I think Vattenfall would agree for this, for the development of renewable energy. We need more renewable power. And of course, we need more and faster investments in the grid so that we can bring the electricity to where it's needed. There are some constraints now in the grid which hamper the development of renewable energy. For example, we have a site in the east of Germany, Schwarzheide, not too far from Dresden. We have a lot of renewable energy production around. We would like sometimes to use this renewable energy at our site, but if we would use it, we would have to pay these high penalties. So this is the first example to show that we have, on the regulatory side, a problem. And second, sometimes we have in this region an oversupply of renewable energy. And windmills have to be turned down and cannot produce the renewable power, which is a pity. And the reason for this is that the grid is not efficient enough to transport it to where it is needed. So this shows that we need to develop a new regulatory system, I think, and we need to develop a grid which can take care of much higher electricity demand in the future than it is today. We think that not only BASF or the chemical industry, but many other industries will increase their power demand a lot, and the grid must grow together with them.
And it's been a topic that has been there for a lot of years now, both on the transmission grid topic, but also expanding the distribution grid to allow for much more decentral generation capacities in Germany. So the EEG 2021, besides sealing the net zero target, also, for instance, increased the offshore wind targets to 20 gigawatts by 2030. Christine, compared to our neighbouring countries, is Germany lagging behind? And what would you wish for? We'll talk to policymakers.
I think the list could be long, but I guess if you just quickly touch on the build-out, which is then also sort of sealed in the new EEG, I guess we are definitely lagging behind. I guess especially, I think I quickly touched it earlier on, if we look at the build-out offshore, I think we of course have also high standards which need to be fulfilled here in the offshore sea. If we look at neighboring countries, you can build a lot closer to shore offshore. That makes it more difficult, longer building times, but also more risky as an investment. I guess there we need to have a lot more discussions about how can we use maybe the areas double, how can this go along, for example, with shipping or military use, just to ensure that we use the areas most efficient. I guess the EEG sort of will look further, or the governments will look further now also how potential funding will look for offshore. Of course, on the one hand, we are fully committed also to be able to take merchant risk, but if you really want to push it, I feel that we also need more security on the build-out, especially as this is really large investments. We think that the CFD mechanism and how we see this also in neighboring countries could at least give a very, a basis for security, also to really boost this. And then I guess the targets, of course, should be far higher, what we really want to achieve, especially given the net zero ambitions. But I think the second is, of course, and I think that's important to see, where do we use then this energy? And I think we, as in Germany, I think you called it industrial leadership or technology leadership, if you really want to maintain this role, the electrification will be the first thing we really have to promote, given, of course, again, EEG hurdles. But if we have this way designed, and this could be the way forward, I think that it's also important to really help the industry. So I feel it's not good just to say you have to reduce your CO2 emissions and you have to do this. It's also good that they get attractive support to really change and make this change also from their side happening. And I feel this is important, as this is what we are proud in Germany for. I guess the whole world knows us for this. So I think it's important that we keep several elements in focus to make it happen. And just maybe a last comment to our neighboring countries. I think also with the EEG, of course, we are quite limited also if you get then certain areas where you can construct your renewable assets, that of course you can also use the certificates in a proper way. I guess there also the European countries are a bit more advanced, and at least it's incentivizing further build out. So I guess we can also learn a bit looking around, but also really looking at our own industry, how we can make them change. I think that's an important topic, I think.
Absolutely. I think one point is a very important point. What you mentioned is having a stable framework of policy. Is that also, Moritz, is that something that you would welcome, and what kind of main policy hurdles do you see in what you do?
For sure, I would, and we would. I think over the last years, especially in wind, but also in PV, we have seen many changes in the regulatory framework, and especially in the feed-in. For both, I think we have reached grid parity, so we are not more that much focused on subsidies as we have been probably before. And in the same time, the self-consumption has risen a lot. So most of the people, especially in PV, are consuming the electricity they are producing on the roof. They're consuming themselves. So on the other hand, we have to do something with the overproduction of the systems, and all these changes year per year. And I recently read that there could be another novel of the EEG by the beginning of this year. We need some more stability in the whole framework, not to lose the trust of the people. I fully agree to what you guys said. I would add a more stable framework would be a good idea. I think we have a lot of administrative hurdles as well, and they are pretty much related to the grid very often. So we have the grid, which has to be somehow adapted to the new requirements that has not been done yet. So we have many administrative hurdles we have to cover before we are even able to build a system. So actually, I would say we have to look at the whole bundle of frameworks we have to see whether they still match to the new market design. They shouldn't match to the market design before, and perhaps not match to the market design in 10 years, but they should match to a market in transition. So we should take a closer look on that, and especially, as I said, for the feed-in, a bit more stability would be really appreciated.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we all agree that it is a matter of providing more stability, but also seems to be a grid topic in many cases, and the nitty-gritty of the policy framework that needs to be adjusted to get to a new market design. So very interesting points. Just we're nearly at the end of the session, and just as a final comment, I think it is important that we all work together to get to a net zero world, and since we're sitting here on a panel for the first time in a long time in person, just what would be your take in achieving a good collaboration with your peers and stakeholders in the market? And maybe we can take one or 2 minutes on reflecting what would be the perfect partnership, for instance, with a utility renewable developer for you in order to achieve the goals, and what would you need to achieve your ambitions?
I think we need intense discussions with developers of renewable energy on the power demand development of our industries, so that they get a picture of what is needed in the market, and we need to understand how fast they can provide this and what are their plans to develop new sites and new areas for renewable energy production, so that this can be synchronized in a plannable way. This, I think, is very important and requires a very trustful cooperation between both parties.
Synchronization, trust.
Yeah.
Let me hand it to Christine. What are you looking for in there when you talk about equity partnerships, PPAs? What is Vattenfall looking for in a partner?
Yeah, I guess I can only add and fully rely to, I think trust is the basis of every cooperation, because you probably talk of a very long-term partnership. It's not just that you decide to do something for a bit of a time. It's really a long-term project. I guess passion is something I find is important, really committed to net zero targets, so that you also strive for the same target, because you can have quite some hurdles in between, and if you're really striving for the same goals, I think that really helps. We are also very happy with someone being in the middle of the transition. I think we have been, or a bit, we are also still in the transition. I think that's always great if you can also learn from each other. And I think last but not least, I think the trust will hopefully also helps you, because it will be a journey. Yeah? You will have good times, you will have challenges times, but I think that you do the things together, like we talked about policies, new feed-in, more clarity. I guess you can do the things together, and I think that would be really nice to help all the targets to be accomplished and reach net zero.
Interesting. So more thriving towards collaboration, working together. So Moritz, just to finish off, what would you need to enhance collaboration with the markets?
I think it's 2 partners. Actually, if it's a partner with whom we would like to approach new customers, new markets, new countries, it is a lot about trust and creativity in finding solutions and making us quicker. So if we find people having competency in helping us to be quicker in a new market with a new segment, this would help a lot. And partners in terms of customers, which we consider as partners, would be, we're always looking for customers, for partners, accepting us as a kind of a full service solution provider. I mean, we did talk a lot about PV today, but STEAG is much more than PV. So what I said in the beginning, combining different technologies, being able to engineer complex systems, so people just trusting us that we're able to do that, and handing us over quite a big part of their energy supply, because I think if you could match different technologies, you could find a better solution than just looking at one technology and other companies looking for another technology. So mixing it up and bringing it like energy as a service, really as a tailor-made solution to the partner.
Coming back to achieving a new market design, new products and so on. Perfect. So we've come to an end of our discussion. We talked about various topics around electrification, adjustment of industrial processes and amazing technologies that could be out there to achieve that. The potential of PPAs in Germany, very much in its infancy, but will become a very interesting market. The role of hydrogen also kind of far down the road for the moment, but would definitely play a role. Big policy hurdles still that we would like to see addressed on the road to net zero. So Moritz, Christine and Roland, thank you so much for the great discussion today and insights. So to the virtual audience, stick around. In a few minutes time we will start with a Zoom Q&A session where we'll be answering all the questions that you have.
Thank you.